The organizational theorist Karl Weick says, "Sensemaking starts with chaos." Sensemaking starts with chaos. I love that line, not only because it's snappy and fun to say, but also because it highlights both the banality and the profundity of how we make sense of the world every day. We encounter the chaotic, the confusing, and the unexpected with striking regularity. Often we take a beat and we're able to reassess and make sense of the information or situation at hand. Other times, though, we get stuck. The information or situation that presents itself is inscrutable using the tools we have to work with. By and large, we have a pretty high tolerance for chaos. We accept that there's a vast array of information and experience that we'll never fully understand. Such is the nature of contemporary life. For whatever reason, making sense of that chaos is a low priority for us. It lacks relevance or even intrigue. However, there is still plenty of chaos, plenty of confusing, unexpected, or just plain weird information that eats at us. It piques our curiosity or provokes our frustration. Trivial or substantial, we want to make it make sense. I'm Tara McMullen, and this is What Works, the show that rethinks work, business, and leadership for the 21st century economy. This is the beginning of a short little mini-series on media and sensemaking. Today, I'm going to focus on what chaos is, why it occurs, and in broad strokes, how we make it make sense. Next week, I'll share some of the heuristics, the mental models, the sort of frameworks that I use to make sense of whatever is feeling chaotic to me. So let's dive in. What is chaos? All right, I know that you know what chaos means, but here what I'm talking about is the condition that emerges when reality doesn't match what we expect reality to be. Maybe you make a great Instagram post and expect it to perform well. Instead, you get crickets. Maybe you share a status update with your boss and expect them to praise the progress you've made. Instead, they criticize the direction you've taken. Or maybe you go through an exhaustive interview process to find your next great team member and expect the candidate you choose will be a perfect fit. And instead, they're a nightmare to work with. And of course, sometimes our expectations are negative, and the results are actually surprisingly positive. That disconnect, though, between expectation and reality, that's chaos. And it's frustrating. Chaos can induce anxiety or cause your confidence to falter. And at the least, it's like an itch you can't quite scratch or a tickle in your throat that no amount of coughing will relieve. When our expectations don't match reality, that's a sign that we're working with the wrong mental model. Now, that's not to say that everything in the world can be explained given the correct framework, but that what often appears to be incoherent, inconsistent, or unexplainable makes sense when we investigate it from a different angle. Further, just because you can make something make sense with a new mental model doesn't mean that it's good or right or just. Making sense isn't morally normative. Instead, adopting a new mental model and making sense of chaos, even when that chaos is bad, is often a prerequisite for positive change. All right, now I'm using the phrase mental model. So what is a mental model? A mental model is an understanding of how things work. It might be a narrative, a shortcut, a framework, a theory, or any other kind of cognitive tool we use to process information and generate predictions. For example, that great Instagram post you made, the one that got crickets, the reason you thought it would perform well is that similar posts have performed well in the past, or that others have had success with similar posts, or that you responded to a concern a large portion of your audience has. Your prior experience, your observations of others' results, and your theory of audience interests are all reasonable mental models, and often they will yield accurate predictions, which can exacerbate the frustration of dealing with the unexpected. Now, in this case, you may assume that something is going on with the algorithm that limited the reach and performance of your post. That assumption is one superficial way of making sense of the situation. Saying, "Ugh, the algorithm," gives you some cognitive or emotional release, but it doesn't help you figure out what to do differently in the future. So instead of just blaming the algorithm, you need a new mental model for how your posts and the algorithm interact. So you start to resolve the chaos by forming a hypothesis and testing it. You gather more and more information until you have a mental model that seems more reliable and useful for reaching your goals. Now you not only understand maybe why that post didn't perform well, but you have an idea of what you can change in the future to get better results. And if you don't want to go through all of that, well, you go and search for someone else's explanation, which is a perfectly reasonable and understandable thing to do. They've done the experimentation for you. They've constructed a mental model you can use. You just need to integrate it into how you think. And once you have that new mental model, once things start to make sense, that's a pretty great feeling, right? It's relief. And it feels like relief even if you still don't like the results of the new mental model. It feels like relief even if you believe things shouldn't work according to your new mental model. At least you can make sense of what's happening. At least you feel more prepared, better equipped to deal with the way things work. Now, my very safe guess, I've been doing this for a long time, is that providing this kind of relief is part of your life and work in one capacity or another. You might make sense of things for a child or partner. Maybe you help your team build a mental model that you can use to achieve business goals. Maybe you're the friend everyone knows to come to when they're confused about a particular subject. Maybe the clients you work with bring their frustrations to you, and you offer them a fresh mental model for making sense of those frustrations. You probably aren't consciously aware of what you're doing. You're not analyzing the other person's mental model to see where they've gone wrong and sharing your exact thought process with them to give them a new way of thinking. It's second nature at this point in your life or work. And most of the time, that is totally fine. You don't have to be conscious of your own sense-making process to help others. But let's say you want or need to communicate with a larger audience. Let's say you're creating a training program, or raising funds for a candidate, or advocating for an important policy, or even engaging in some public scholarship. These are all times when it pays, sometimes literally, to bring awareness to your mental model and how it provides the relief that comes from making sense of chaos. Many years ago now, I took a copywriting class from Joanna Wiebe, founder of Copy Hackers. And bottom line, copywriting really is just a form of persuasion, a form of communicating with larger audiences or people that you don't know in order to persuade them to buy something or do something or maybe believe something. Now, from Joanna, I learned that the first step in figuring out what you're going to say to intrigue and persuade someone is to ask, What do they know right now? What do they know right now? That question was similar to the kind of pre-writing I already did, but the question unlocked a treasure trove of new information for me. See, I always started a copywriting project, or really any persuasive writing project, by asking, what do my readers do, say, think, and feel? Then I would use the answers to inform how I tackled a subject. But doing, saying, thinking, and feeling don't exist in a vacuum, of course. Even thinking and feeling have an epistemic context. That is, what people know, or think they know, is a sort of scaffolding that they build their actions, speech, thoughts, and emotions on top of. That scaffolding? That's a mental model. I need to know how and why my reader does, says, thinks, and feels the way they do to connect with them. I need to know it to show them the flaws in their approach, why their actions, speech, and thoughts aren't producing the scenario they expect. And I need to know it so that I can contrast the model I'm advocating for against their existing model. Too often, valuable communication doesn't land because it tries to perch a new mental model on top of the rickety scaffolding that is producing the chaos wreaking havoc on our understanding. This communication doesn't acknowledge the existing framework that people are using or the feelings it produces. But persuasive, sticky, and relieving communication begins by acknowledging chaos and showing how it emerges. For example, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz became an overnight sensation when he dubbed Republicans' behavior as weird.
That I made. I just have to say it. You know it, you feel it. These guys are creepy and yes, just weird as hell. That's what you see. That's what you see.
Weird. That one word both acknowledged the chaos many people felt and, at the risk of exaggerating just slightly, supplied a new way to make sense of it. Walz keyed in on something seemingly obvious, but causing chaos nonetheless. Republicans were saying weird stuff and doing weird things. But our existing mental models, the ones that said, well, these are intelligent, moral, serious people, why are they acting like this? Those mental models were trying to justify this behavior and coming up woefully short. The result? Chaos. When Walz said, hey, that's weird, he sent a wave of relief out over the airwaves. His statement was a permission slip to stop trying to fit the weirdness into an existing model of normalcy and start making sense of it simply through the lens of weird. Yes, it was funny. Yes, it probably wasn't the most rigorous way to approach things. Yes, it felt delightfully juvenile. But it was also a mental model that made sense. It relieved the chaos, if only for a short time. Now that said, making sense of chaos feels good, which means it's possible to exploit the process. Savvy marketers, cunning thought leaders, and shrewd politicians earn their often lucrative livelihoods on this kind of pithy sense-making. Some we agree with, and some we definitely don't. Pundits of all stripes build their whole careers on peddling new mental models in the form of sound bites. Our media landscape is rife with mental models that are professing to make sense of chaos. Making sense is a tool, one that can be used for purposes that are good and right and just, and also a tool that can be used for exploitation, oppression, and dominance. Offering new mental models, new ways of making sense of a very confusing world is a powerful tool. And just because it can be used for nefarious purposes doesn't mean we shouldn't use it to communicate our meaningful ideas and make remarkable media. In fact, I believe that we must. To be transformative over the long term, making sense has to be more than sound bites or slogans. As good as it might feel, it has to be more than weird. It must be a rigorous approach to deconstructing the outdated or ineffective mental models that produce chaos and reconstructing mental models that inspire us to make different choices and take action in new ways. Next week, I'll share a few of the mental models I often rely on to make sense of what would otherwise be chaos. In the meantime, I invite you to consider what feels chaotic to you right now. Where do your expectations not match reality? In what ways might your mental model need an update? Now, if making sense is something you know you want to do more of for people you care about, in September, I'm hosting Making Sense, an 8-week workshop on turning meaningful ideas into remarkable media. Step by step, I'll help you identify the ways that you already make sense for your audience or team members, stakeholders, or students so that you can create articles, videos, podcasts, white papers, or social media posts that make a bigger impact. To get all the information on Making Sense, go to makingsense.fyi. That's makingsense.fyi. Today's episode was written, edited, and produced by me, Tara McMullen. What Works is a production of Yellow House Media, a boutique audio and video production studio that turns meaningful ideas into remarkable content. What Works is produced on the ancestral homeland of the Conestoga and Susquehannock people, and the Yellow House is located on the lands of the Salish and Kootenai peoples.